Okay, what's up? What's going on? So right now what we're going to do is a very rudimentary example of how to use a food scale. So what I did was I got a couple different food items that you might be using, but the key here is to make sure that you're measuring the correct way. So whenever we have a food that's trackable, that's the most important thing is we want foods that are trackable. We have nutrition facts on the back. And the keys we're going to want to look for are the calories. And I know this is going to be backwards because of the camera, but try and follow along the best you can. So we have the calories on the back, the grams in fat, the grams from carbohydrates, and the grams from protein. And for now, that's all we want to focus on. There's other things that are important to track as well, like fiber content, the amount of sodium you're taking in. But for my clients who are just starting out, that's not super important. And what I want you to focus on is hitting your calorie goals, your protein goals, and then the other macronutrients as well, the carbohydrates and the fats. And we've talked about this already, but when you're on your initial fat loss journey, it's okay to kind of, not take those numbers. I don't want to say not take them as serious, but you don't have to follow the macros to the T. When things get more difficult, fat loss stalls and becomes harder, we'll be sure to dial in those macronutrients and make sure that we're hitting them every single day. But for now, this is going to be a basic example of what I'd like to see. So when you have a food scale, it'll look something like this, right? And you're going to turn it on, and most food scales are very similar. So for example, we have a unit button, which is going to be your unit of measurement, and then we have the on and off button. So it just turned off, so let's turn it back on. It'll go here. Okay, here we are. Hopefully we can see that, and hopefully the numbers are somewhat clear. So what we'll do when we want to have a certain serving size of food, for example, first thing we want to do is find our unit of measurement. So to start, we're going to play with grams. So we're going to find where it says G. That stands for grams, right? Now say we're going to have some oatmeal for breakfast. We're going to put our bowl that we're going to use on. Now the bowl weighs a certain amount of whatever that unit is measuring. So here it says the bowl weighs 2 grams. We're not eating the bowl, so we don't want to include the bowl in our measurements. What we'll do is we'll hit what's called the tare button. A lot of them have tare buttons or zero out buttons or whatever. That's actually right here. So we're going to want to zero it out so that it doesn't account for the weight of the bowl, and now our weight is at 0. Next thing we're going to want to do is grab our oatmeal, right? So excuse my kitchen, it's a little bit dirty, but we're just going to use this as an example. So we have our oatmeal here. Now on the back, you'll see that one serving size is 40 grams. 1/2 cup dry is 40 grams. And that 1/2 cup is what gives you these numbers. So for 40 grams, we're looking at 150 calories, 3 grams of protein, 27 grams of carbs, and 5 grams of protein. 3 grams of fat on top. I think I said that wrong. Anyways, what we're going to do is if we want one serving size, we're going to weigh it out until it says 40 grams. Now be careful, because a lot of the times it takes a minute to catch up. If you're pouring it very quick, it's going to seem much heavier at first. So here we have 42. That's not accurate enough, so I'm going to use my hands. This is just an example until we get to 40. Now hitting these numbers is very important. If you're not on point with your calories and your numbers, then that can throw things off, even if it's by a couple. So we want to be as accurate as possible. So here we are at 40 grams, and say that's the amount I want for the day. Then boom, we'll add water, put it in the microwave, do whatever you got to do to cook it afterwards. And that's an example for how to measure your oatmeal out. So if you wanted 2 servings, then you would add 80 grams and track it that way. But remember, if you have 2 servings, then that's going to turn it to 300 calories and 6 grams of fat, and 27 times 2, 54 grams of carbs, etc., 10 grams of protein. So you want to make sure that you're tracking the serving size accurately by the gram or by whatever unit of measure it's asking for. Now another example, I'll throw this back in here to use, would be, let's throw our bowl on here, and just to be safe, we'll zero it out one more time. Say you want to add some olive oil to your food, right? This is a very common, dressing or whatever you want to call it, but a lot of people don't account for these types of things. Something I want you guys to pay attention to and be wary of is anything that you consume that has caloric value, calories in it, you have to track no matter what it is. I don't care if it's soda, something you're drinking, if it's ranch, if it's ketchup, if it's olive oil, it has to be tracked because you're consuming it. Calories are units of energy, right? That is what we use as a fuel source. So all of this needs to be accounted for. If we eat more calories than we burn, then we're going to gain weight. That's not what we want in most cases. We want to be burning more than we consume. So the only way we can keep track of that is by properly tracking everything that we consume that goes into our body. So here we can see from the nutrition facts, I hope you guys can see that as well, is that one serving size is 1 tablespoon, which is 15 milliliters. Now, this is where a scale really comes into play and is really key, because a tablespoon can mean anything depending on how you measure it. So to give you an example, if I pull out a spoon here, say we measure, this much. I hope this is getting here. You know what I mean? Now that's not a whole tablespoon, but what I'm saying is you're never going to be completely accurate by saying, hey, I'm going to measure out a tablespoon of olive oil. So what we'll do instead is we set our unit of measurement to milliliters rather, and the serving size of olive oil is 15. So we're going to gently pour it onto the food scale, and see it's calculating the numbers now. Up until we get to about 15 is the number we want. And now this is just an example that I'm pulling it into the bowl. Now, if you had a plate of salad or a plate of food you wanted to add it to, you can do that as well. You would have just had to zero it out and then add the olive oil on top of that. So here we're at 14, getting pretty close to our serving size here. Add a little bit more. And maybe just a tad bit. Boom, and then we're at 15 there. So that's going to be our serving size that we want. And then, you could add it to whatever you're using. Or like I said, if say you had, our next example, say you had a bowl of your favorite meat or whatever you wanted to use. Well, what we would do there is we would zero out the scale. And just like we did, we would add 15 milliliters of olive oil to it, right? And that's how we would go about that. So the last one I'm going to show you guys is a protein source. I'm going to get rid of this here. And I know I have no cameraman, so bear with me. Next one, we're going to show you guys one more unit of measure. We're going to go to ounces. So in this one, we can see pounds and ounces, right? So say we have our ground turkey here. And one thing I want you guys to really key in on is meats. Every meat that you consume, you want to measure as cooked. So you never measure your meats raw. You want to measure them after you cook them, because when they're raw, they have water in them and other things that get burned up through the cooking process. So make sure you're always weighing your final product, right? That doesn't go for oatmeal and things like that. These things you want to measure dry, but meats you always measure cooked weight after you're done cooking and the water's extracted and the fat and all that stuff burns off from the food. But anyway, say the next thing you want is, wash the spoon off here. Say the next thing you want is 5 ounces of turkey is the serving size you want. Well, what you'll do is add the turkey to the scale, keep adding it, basic stuff. And I know some of this can be, very repetitive and not the quickest way, before eating. But like I said, this is kind of what's required for you to be 100% accurate. A good quote I like to say is, what gets measured gets managed. And when it comes to calorie consumption and following a proper diet, we have to manage the amount of calories we're eating, because otherwise we have nothing to base our results off of. And we don't know what to add or subtract or how to adjust so that our fat loss can continue going forward. So here we have 5 ounces. That would have been my serving size that we can see here, 5.0. And then boom, you throw it in the oven, whatever it is, and cook it and eat it that way. So the next thing After that, just to show you guys one more example, is some things you don't have to weigh necessarily. So say, for example, we got some Uncle Ben's rice we want to throw with that turkey we just had. Well, we have our serving sizes on the back here. And what it says is there's 2 servings per container. We'll say I want the whole bag. Well, then just double the serving size. And you don't have to weigh something like this. You can just throw it in the microwave and eat it as long as you account for the 2 servings that are in the bag, right? That makes it a little bit easier. But for foods where you're not going to consume the whole package, or it doesn't give you an option like that, you know what I mean, then it's a lot easier to track via the weight of the food that you're eating using the scale. So I hope that helps. Try and follow that along the best you can. If you have any questions, as always, if you're a client of mine, you can text me or email me. And if you're into coaching and don't know who I am and just happen to stumble across this video, I'll leave my email down below along with the online coaching form that you can fill out if that's something that's of interest to you. Other than that, have a nice day. See you later.